And let me tell y'all something. You know, there are moments in life where you think you have heard every story, every wisdom, every lesson a man can give. I have sat with pastors, I have talked to imams, I have studied a whole lot of history in my time, and I thought I had a good grasp on what a great leader looks like. But then you start digging into the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and you realize real quick, hold up, this man was not just leading people, he was raising a whole world. Every time I read something new about him, I find myself sitting back like, man, how did one man do all that? And I'm talking about real stuff, not fairy tales, not legends. I am talking about things witnessed by whole towns, whole armies, whole families, things recorded, preserved, and passed on with a clarity you just cannot fake. And what strikes me the most is how his miracles were not flashy, Hollywood-style spectacles. It was not about explosions in the sky or thunder shaking the earth. No, man, his miracles were calm, steady, controlled moments where the universe bent just enough to prove, yes, this man is who he says he is. Yes, he is sent by the one who created all of this and the people around him. Regular folks, shepherds, warriors, mothers, kids. They saw things that made them drop everything they once believed because they knew nobody on earth could do that on his own. And I am sitting here reading these stories like, man, this is some next level stuff, because it's not the miracle itself that moves you, it is the purpose behind it. Every miracle he performed, every moment where the supernatural touched the natural, it came at a time when people needed guidance, reassurance, or clarity. It was not for show, it was for truth. See, the first time I really started paying attention was when I heard the story about how people asked him for proof. They said, if you are truly a prophet, show us something. And this man, this calm-centered man, did not yell, did not get offended, did not try to argue his way through it. He simply pointed to the moon, and what happened next? The moon, something no human being can touch, let alone manipulate, split in two halves clear as day hanging in the sky, seen by the whole city. And after a moment, they came back together like nothing happened. And I sat there reading that like, man, what do you even do with that? Because let me tell you something. If somebody splits the moon in front of me, I am not asking them another question. I am following them wherever they go. And the crazy part, the people who hated him the most, the ones who could not stand his message, they still could not deny what they saw, that is, how real it was. Even his enemies had to whisper, yeah, we saw it too. What moved me even more was how he walked through life with a calm confidence that can only come from someone who knows exactly where he came from and who sent him. You read about the miracles happening around him, and you start noticing a pattern. They always came in the exact moment where someone needed to see God's power right there in front of them. When the man and his companions were thirsty, water flowed from his fingers like a fountain. You hear that the first time and you think, ain't no way. But then you look at the narration and realize there were not 2 or 3 people who witnessed, that there were dozens grown men drinking water from something that should not be producing a drop, and they looking around at each other like, is this really happening right now? Just imagine being there, standing beside him, watching something that defies every law of nature, but feeling zero panic, just peace, just certainty. That is what his miracles did. They did not just amaze people, they settled people. And then you get to the gentler miracles, the kind that touch your heart more than they shock your mind. Animals recognizing him, trees leaning toward him, stones greeting him with peace. It sounds strange until you realize the deeper point. The whole universe knew this. Man, the whole creation recognized truth when it walked in front of him. And I am sitting there thinking, man, today we got people who do not even recognize their own blessings, but trees were recognizing him. That tells you something about the level this man was on. What really gets me, though, what pulls at me in a way no documentary or lecture ever could, is how humble he was through all of it. Because let me tell you something, if most folks today saw water start pouring out their fingertips, they would be on Instagram live in 15 seconds, they would be doing interviews, signing brand deals, putting out books called The Secrets of My Supernatural. But this man, he performed miracles that would shake the very bones of a nation, and he went right back to teaching, guiding, comforting people, right back to serving the orphans, feeding the poor, helping the needy, treating everyone with kindness. Even the folks who threw rocks at him cursed him out and tried to take his life. That humility, that is the part that hits me hardest, because the miracles prove he was a prophet, but the character proves he was chosen. You know, the more I kept reading about this man, the more I realized his miracles were not just things that happened around him. They were things that followed him like a shadow, like the world itself was responding to his presence. And the craziest part is how natural, how effortless these moments, where he was not out here trying to impress anybody. He was not lifting mountains or calling down storms just to make people gasp. No, man, his miracles came in these quiet, powerful moments that hit the heart deeper than anything loud ever could. And when you look closely, you start seeing that a miracle is not just something big and shiny. Sometimes it is a sign, a rescue, a moment of comfort that shows up exactly when a person needs it most. Take the journey to Medina, for example. Now, this is something that really made me sit back in my chair. The man had enemies hunting him down, trying to stop him by any means necessary. They were not playing around. They were ready to take his life to stop the message he brought. And as he and his companion hid in that cave, you would expect panic, you would expect fear. That is a moment most people would break down. But what happened? A spider spun a web across the entrance, so perfect, so complete, that the trained soldiers chasing him took one look at it and said, "Ain't nobody been inside here." A tiny spider, a fragile web protecting the greatest man to ever walk this earth. And the beauty of it, the prophet did not look at that and say, "Wow, nature saved me." He said, "My Lord protected me." That level of trust, that level of calm in a moment like that, that itself is a miracle. And you start noticing something about the way these miracles show up. They always teach you a lesson. They always tell you something deeper. For example, the way food multiplied in his presence. Now look, I grew up in a big family. I know what it's like when you do not have enough food to go around. You cut everything. Then you pray nobody's too hungry. You stretch that pot as far as you can stretch it. But with Prophet Muhammad, the opposite happened. They would bring him a bowl that could barely feed one or two people, and by the time he prayed over it and started serving, everyone in the gathering would eat until they were full, and the bowl would still be sitting there with food in it. You cannot fake that kind of thing. People saw it with their own eyes. People ate from the same bowl. People walked away shocked, looking at each other, saying, "We did not imagine that, did we?" And you know what he did? Afterward, he thanked God, just humble, grateful, like it was not even something extraordinary. And then there is the story that touches me in a completely different way. The crying tree. I remember the first time I heard that, I thought, man, there is no way. But the more you look into it, the more undeniable it becomes. The prophet used to lean on a palm trunk while delivering sermons when a proper pulpit was built for him, and he moved away from that tree. The whole gathering heard the trunk crying, wailing, like a child missing its parent. A tree crying because it missed being near him. He walked over, placed his hand on it, and the crying stopped, like the tree was comforted. Now, I do not know about you, but I have never seen anything in nature respond to a person with that kind of emotion, and that is not even the part that gets me. It is how he treated the tree. He comforted it, a tree, because he had a heart big enough to feel for everything around him. And you know what that tells me? When the creation feels safe around you, when even a tree feels comfort in your presence, that says something about your soul. But out of everything, the miracle that shakes me the deepest is the night journey, the Isra and Miraj, because let me tell you something. This is not some bedtime story. This is a moment where the world, the heavens, the unseen, and the seen all opened up for one man. In one night, he traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem, a journey that took people days and days back then. and he did not stop. There he ascended through the heavens, meeting previous prophets, witnessing realities no human being has ever witnessed. And when he came back, he did not describe it like a dream, like a vision. He described it like a man who just came back from a trip, and people doubted. They laughed, they mocked him. But you know who stood up immediately? Abu Bakr, without hesitation. He said, if Muhammad said it happened, then it happened. You know how strong your character has got to be for a man to defend you like that without even needing evidence. And then when the people started questioning him, the prophet described Jerusalem, a place he had never visited, in perfect detail. That shut everybody up real quick. That is when you realize some miracles are not for the eyes, they are for the heart. They are for the believer who understands that when God supports you, the world becomes your path. But let me tell you what really ties all these miracles together. It is not the scale of them. It is not the shock. It is not the supernatural. The real miracle is that every one of these signs came through a man who was gentle, patient, kind and humble, a man who lived simply, a man who fixed his own clothes, sat with orphans, played with children, respected women, forgave enemies, stood up for the oppressed, a man who had the power of the universe behind him, but walked through life like a servant of God, not a king demanding worship. That contrast, that balance, that purity, you do not see that combination anywhere else in history. And you start realizing something powerful. His miracles were not meant to entertain people. They were meant to guide them. They were meant to soften hearts, open minds, break arrogance, and show the world that this man was not speaking from himself. He was carrying a message bigger than any one of us, a message meant to reshape humanity. His miracles were not tricks. They were proof. And the man behind them, that was the real evidence. Man, let me tell you something. The more you look at the life of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, the more you realize these were not just stories people stitched together. These were moments that shook whole civilizations. You got the moon splitting right in front of people who hated him. You got water flowing from his fingers when the whole army was about to collapse. From thirst, you got trees leaning toward him like they knew exactly who was walking by. And every time something miraculous happened, he never bragged, never claimed credit, never said, look what I can do. He always pointed straight to God. That humility, that purity, that is a miracle by itself. In a world where everybody wants lights, cameras, and applause, this man was not chasing fame. He was guiding hearts. And that is why the miracles still hit. People today, they do not just impress you, they move you. And here is the wildest part. 1,500 years later, people still feel those miracles in their lives, not because they saw the moon split, but because his message still splits right from wrong, not because they watch water pour from his fingers, but because his teachings still save people from drowning in their own problems. That is the sign of a real prophet. The miracles were not just moments in history. They were proofs for every generation that came after, and the more you study him, the more you understand why whole empires changed, why whole hearts changed. The man was a mercy, a leader, a guide. Man, let me tell you something. The more you look at the life of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, the more you realize these were not just stories people stitched together. These were moments that shook whole civilizations. You got the moon splitting right in front of people who hated him. You got water flowing from his fingers when the whole army was about to collapse. From thirst, you got trees leaning toward him like they knew exactly who was walking by. And every time something miraculous happened, he never bragged, never claimed credit, never said, look what I can do. He always pointed straight to God. That humility, that purity, that is a miracle by itself. In a world where everybody wants lights, cameras, and applause, this man was not chasing fame. He was guiding hearts. And that is why the miracles still hit. People today, they do not just impress you, they move you. And here is the wildest part. 1,500 years later, people still feel those miracles in their lives, not because they saw the moon split, but because his message still splits right from wrong, not because they watch water pour from his fingers, but because his teachings still save people from drowning in their own problems. That is the sign of a real prophet. The miracles were not just moments in history, they were proofs for every generation that came after, and the more you study him, the more you understand why whole empires changed, why whole hearts changed. The man was a mercy, a leader, a guide.